mid-1990s, video games were beginning to embrace the third dimension. The PC, Sony PlayStation, Sega Saturn, and Nintendo 64 were locked in a feverish race to perfect the polygonal playground. In 1996, id Software finished Quake, Capcom released Resident Evil, Nintendo dropped Super Mario 64, and Sony created Crash Bandicoot. Gamers suddenly had to manage camera control and multi-directional movement after side-scrollers had dominated the previous decade. A year earlier, England-based Core Design began working on a 3D action-adventure set in ancient catacombs filled with undiscovered treasure, a genre that was recently popularized by the Indiana Jones trilogy. To separate their concept from Lucasfilm's famed American archaeologist, animator Toby Gard made his central character a British woman. Originally dubbed Lara Croft, the heroine's first name was simplified, presumably to help in pronunciation, and a scan of the local telephone book in Derby came up with a more UK-sounding last name. Tomb Raider launched on November 14, 1996 for the Saturn, PlayStation, and MS-DOS. It starred Lara Croft, a voluptuous gunslinger whose name appeared on the game's box art as if she was already a celebrity.
What's a man gotta do to get that kind of attention from you?
It's hard to say exactly, but you seem to be doing fine.
Lara's voice was supplied by Shelley Blond, who would go on to pursue a career in voiceover, but never returned for a second Tomb Raider game.
How does that make your wallet rumble?
I'm sorry, I only play for sport.
Lara's outlandish proportions were the result of Toby Gard accidentally adjusting the slider for her bosom too far. Once his fellow developers saw the results, there was no going back. Lara began her first adventure in the employment of business tycoon Jacqueline Natla. She was hired to hunt down one piece of a relic known as the Skion. The legend said was owned by the rulers of Atlantis. Lara uncovered the first fragment in Peru, and after being double-crossed by her employers, sought the rest of the relic in Greece, Egypt, and eventually the lost living city of Atlantis. Natla turned out to be one of the kingdom's creators. She was placed in stasis for centuries by her fellow rulers Qualopec and Tihocan, after using the Skion to birth genetic mutations. After a confrontation with Natla and her abominations, Lara escaped the island pyramid, as it was again lost to the ages. Tomb Raider made its name doing three things brilliantly: exploration, puzzle solving, and gunplay. Sprawling catacombs housed switches and levers that opened doors to dens of enemies, from wolves to dinosaurs to gun-wielding mercenaries. Lara auto-targeted her foes with a pair of pistols, magnums, Uzis, or a shotgun. Ammo and health packs could be picked up off enemies or found in a number of secret hidey holes. Lara started with her trusty dual pistols and had to pick up the other weapons manually. In case her magnum, Uzi, or shotgun stock was depleted, Lara's signature shooters never ran dry. Lara made a splash because of how gracefully she moved throughout each environment. She could jump, flip, dive, roll, sidestep, climb, hang, shimmy, swim, and move giant blocks to open passages or create stepping stones. Some puzzles encompassed entire rooms and feature segments that could be completed in any order. Players could save anywhere in the DOS version, while floating blue crystals allowed the player to save once per location on the Saturn and PS1. Every precipitous ledge potentially led to a shocking, painful death. Before jumping into the adventure, players had the option of visiting Lara's home, Croft Manor, and practicing her traversal skills on custom-built platforms. At the time of Tomb Raider's release, Eidos Interactive was rumored to be facing financial difficulties and could have never predicted the game's phenomenal success. It received the Origins Award for Best Action Computer Game of 1997, topped the British game sales charts a record 3 times, and to date has sold over 8 million copies, roughly tying its sequel for the 4th best-selling PS1 game of all time. But if Tomb Raider was a household name, Lara Croft was an international superstar.
So you think all this talking is just holding me up?
She appeared on the cover of several magazines, some that had little to do with games, and several companies wanted her to be their spokesperson. Some fans were so hot and bothered for Miss Croft, they devised a patch called Nude Raider that left Lara in her birthday suit, a secret mode originally suggested to and rejected by Toby Gard. They faced legal action from Eidos ever since. Lara was becoming so close to being an actual person that Eidos decided to hire a flesh-and-blood woman to portray her at all their trade events. Natalie Cook was hired to don the ponytail and pistols for commercials and the European Computer Trade Show in 1996, but aspiring actress Rhoda Mitra inexplicably replaced her in 1997 after the game was finally released. This shuffling of Lara models would repeat itself several times throughout the franchise's lifespan.
Evolution's in a rut. Shipping out fresh meat will incite territorial rages again. Will strengthen and advance us. Even create new breeds.
All this attention must have gone straight to Lara's head, but it began to upset her creator, Toby Gard. He had always seen the Tomb Raider as a brave, confident go-getter, a role model for a generation of young girls without many women to look up to that weren't valued solely as objects. The fact that she had become gaming's latest pin-up girl didn't sit well with him, and as plans were quickly being assembled for another Croft adventure, Toby left Core Design. Toby was replaced by Stuart Atkinson, and the development team more than doubled. It took 18 months to develop the first game, but Core delivered the sequel in less than a year. A month before its release, Sony Computer Entertainment America finished a deal with Eidos to keep the console version of each Tomb Raider sequel exclusive to the PlayStation until the year 2000. Tomb Raider 2 landed in stores a year after its predecessor on November 18, 1997. Tomb Raider 2 starred actress Judith Gibbons, who, aside from Lara's third game, has no other acting credits to her name.
Pardon me, if that was just your way of trying the doors for me.
The developers streamlined Lara's digital curves and gave the heroine a bobbing ponytail. The acrobatic wonder could now wade through waist-deep water and perform a 180 while jumping or swimming. She changed out of her tight white shirt and brown shorts for a few areas, donning a wetsuit and bomber jacket. Flares were added to her backpack to navigate pitch-black areas, her arsenal expanded to include an M16, grenade launcher, and harpoon gun, and Lara could hijack 2 types of vehicles, boats and snowmobiles. The story followed Lara in pursuit of the dagger of Xian, a relic used by an ancient emperor of China and rumored to turn anyone who stabbed themselves in the heart with it into a dragon. Marco Bartoli, an Italian mafia figure, desired the dagger as much as Lara. She squared off against his minions in Venice, Tibet, and China, along with an oil rig, the wreck of the sunken Maria Dora, and Lara's manor when Bartoli's men sought revenge after their boss and his draconic dreams went up in smoke. Like the PC version of the original, Tomb Raider 2 on PS1 let players save at any point. This helped fans manage the more action-focused levels that ventured outside much more than the first Tomb Raider. Zip lines carried Lara across wide gaps, and certain windows could be shot out. Secret areas now held one gold, silver, and jade dragon statue per level that awarded a cache of supplies when all three were discovered. Tomb Raider 2 was a highly anticipated game, and despite average reviews, it quickly surpassed the sales figures of the original, although the total sales of both games would eventually even out. Lara's mug began showing up in commercials for the Spanish automobile company Seat, the UK sports drink Lucozade, and U2 used her likeness in the 1997 World Tour Pop Mart. The team at Eidos was committed to delivering a new Tomb Raider every November, so there was no break between the development of Tomb Raider 2 and its inevitable sequel. Tomb Raider 3 launched on November 21, 1998. Lara's appearance didn't change much in her third game, and her voice remained the same, but the gameplay featured a few enhancements. Lara could crouch, crawl, sprint, and swing over bars. She could now operate a quad bike, kayak, hydropropeller, and minecart. Quicksand and freezing rivers were added to the list of hazards, and piranha hunted Lara underwater. Save crystals returned on the PS1, but players now collected and kept them to use wherever they liked.
It's not from India, rather an island near Antarctica. It is in fact meteorite rock. See that? That's unique. An unknown material.
So how did it end up here?
Lara's newest conquest was to capture 4 stones crafted from a meteorite that crashed into Antarctica millions of years ago. She found the first in an Indian jungle, and after meeting Dr. Mark Willard from the RX Tech Corporation, found out the other 3 lay resting in 3 spots around the globe. For the first time, the player could choose the order they would explore these 3 regions: the beaches of the South Pacific, Area 51 in the Nevada desert, and the cobbled streets of London. Tomb Raider 3's reviews and sales did not match the game that came before it, but it has sold a total of 6.5 million copies worldwide on the PS1, making it the 10th best-selling game for the system. Lara's popularity continued to rise. Rona Mitra was replaced by Nell McAndrew for Tomb Raider 3's promotion. Even the first game reappeared in the spotlight with the release of Tomb Raider Gold exclusively for PC and Mac. The package featured the original game along with 4 new levels spread across 2 new scenarios called Shadow of the Cat and Unfinished Business. While the 3D generation of games was still trying to find its footing, Lara had effectively shown the big boys how it was done. Critiques raised against the second and third Tomb Raider games mostly took note that not much had substantially changed in the series since the first adventure. The team at Eidos had focused more on quantity than quality when it came to each subsequent release. And while fans were still stuck on Lara Croft, she would have to keep fighting to stay alive. In part 2 of our Tomb Raider retrospective, Lara dies and is born again. She leaves the PlayStation 1 and launches expeditions on the PlayStation 2, Game Boy Color, and the silver screen. In 1999, Lara was already digging through the code of her fourth game, and core design worked virtually non-stop to make this happen. Tomb Raider was the only PlayStation franchise outside of annual sports games that was on its fourth major installment on Sony's platform that year. Most action games like it wouldn't see their Chapter 4 until the next century, and the next PlayStation. Tomb Raider 4: The Last Revelation launched on November 22nd for the PS1. With PlayStation exclusivity ending the following year, it also appeared on the Sega Dreamcast the following March. For the second time, Lara's voice was recast. Moving forward, she was portrayed by Jonelle Elliott, who would stay on for the next 3 games and later continue her career in television animation.
Tell me now, or you've just run out of time.
After posing for Playboy, Nell McAndrew was swapped for a real-life Lara, Lara Weller. Lara's digital physique was pumped up with more polygons, and her mouth now moved when she spoke, replacing the head bobbing that passed for speaking before. The composer was also new, as Peter Connolly came on board to replace Nathan McCree for the next 2 Tomb Raider games.
The pace is quickening now, yeah? One more crossing, child. Or do you wish to stop for tea?
The story began in 1984 when Lara was a teenager. In the first level, she joined her mentor, Werner von Croy, in exploring the Temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia for a relic called the Iris. Von Croy seized the Iris but was enclosed within its resting place, and Lara barely escaped the temple alive. In present-day 1999, she mistakenly removed the Amulet of Horus from an Egyptian tomb. This brought back the tomb's owner, Set, who could only be returned to his prison during the millennial constellation when the deity Horus could be summoned. Lara equipped herself with a new crossbow and revolver while touring Egypt's hotspots. She got behind the wheel of a Jeep, and finally a motorbike, after riding one in several of the earlier game's cinemas. Her methods of exploring expanded to climbing poles, swinging on ropes, and shimmying around corners that stopped her in the past. The item menu switched from a ring-shaped view to a linear list, and certain items could be combined like the other predominant action puzzler, Resident Evil. Last Revelation reverted back to a straightforward storyline, with Lara's track as a young woman filling in for Croft Manor's training grounds. Except for this tutorial in Cambodia, the game took place in Egypt, among popular archaeological attractions like King's Valley and Alexandria. Lara discovered Von Croy had been possessed by Set, and after confronting the two of them in Cairo, she set off for the Great Pyramid of Giza. She sealed the mighty Set away, and met a supposedly clear-headed Von Croy during her escape. As the collapsing pyramid caught up, Lara rejected Von Croy's efforts to save her and disappeared in the dust. The ending left fans in the dark, and the future of the series seemed uncertain. The reviews for Last Revelation were lower than those of its innovative predecessors, but sales continued to impress. It was a bestseller in the UK for 2 months, and closed with around 5 million in sales overall. Those who played it on the PC were treated to a level editor, the first time any development tools have been added to a Tomb Raider game. This inspired UK publication The Times, who had earlier funded real-life expeditions that led to the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, to join with Eidos in creating a single level based on the remarkable finding. To the developers, Lara was rotting in a sarcophagus somewhere and could stay there if it meant their nightmarish deadlines were over. But Lara Croft would prove far too resilient for that. Laura Weller bowed out of series promotion, welcoming the fifth Lara model, Lucy Clarkson, who accepted the role at age 17. And the production wheel at Core and Eidos continued its grind. Tomb Raider Chronicles arrived in stores in November of 2000. Lara continued to be playable thanks to the combined memories of Winston Smith, Lara's butler, Father Bram Patrick Dunstan, the Croft family priest, and Charles Kane, Lara's former history teacher. The three gathered inside Lara's home after her memorial and reminisced about some of her greatest exploits. The first followed her through Rome, chasing rivals Pierre Dupont and Larson Conway from Tomb Raider 1 to the Philosopher's Stone, known to U.S. Harry Potter fans as the Sorcerer's Stone. The second pitted her against Russian mafioso Sergei Mikhailov in search of the Spear of Destiny near the ocean's floor. The third traveled back to her childhood when strange rumors tempted her to search out the haunted Black Isle of Ireland. The fourth and final section saw Lara retrieving the iris she originally lost from Werner von Croy from one of his industrial complexes in New York City. Chronicles featured the least amount of enhancements when compared to the prior three sequels. Lara could saunter across a tightrope, roll out of crawl spaces, and sneak up on enemies with a stealth attack. And the MP5 submachine gun was upgraded to an HK model named after the manufacturer. Lara's house was again omitted, and she instead trained in the backstage area of an opera house in Rome. She slipped on a black catsuit to be sexy and stealthy in New York, and donned full-body camouflage to brave the chill of the Barents Sea. Chronicles had the lowest cumulative review scores and sales of any game in the Tomb Raider series so far, but it was still an incredibly popular game, selling over 1.5 million copies. Lara's harshest critiques likened the fifth Tomb Raider game to games released 5 years earlier, and said playing it was like going back in time. The series had survived for half a decade using the same game engine, and all parties involved agreed it was time to technically start over from scratch. Lara was in for some interesting developments, but would not return to consoles until 2003. The series next surfaced in the least likely of locations, the Game Boy Color. The system had been upgraded from the monochrome original in 1998 and now had enough definition to accommodate the curvaceous explorer. Her first portable journey was simply called Tomb Raider and featured her side-scrolling through 5 areas and 14 levels in search of the Nightmare Stone, a gem with the power to revive the evil god Quackset. It was released in June of 2000, 4 months before Tomb Raider Chronicles. Lara stood 48 pixels tall on the Game Boy Color. Save crystals marked progress thanks to a battery backup, and Lara could perform an astonishing 25 different moves. Lara only packed twin pistols, ditching the rest of her usual arsenal, but the experience was still surprisingly innovative and polished. Lara returned to the Game Boy Color a year later in Curse of the Sword. After Lara was cut by an antique blade, she was marked as the vessel for the return of a wicked magician named Madame Pivot, forcing Lara to find and destroy the cursed weapon. Keeping the gameplay similar to the first Game Boy Tomb Raider, Curse of the Sword covered 7 different areas, and each environment expanded in scope and detail. It reviewed as high, if not higher, than the game that came before it. The year that Lara was cursed by the sword, Nintendo launched the Game Boy Advance, and Lara was quick to notice. She went portable a third time on the new system in 2002, and Eidos, along with developer Ubisoft, attempted to shift her perspective. Instead of scrolling side to side, Tomb Raider: The Prophecy viewed its action from an isometric angle. On this particular adventure, Lara sought the tomb of Ezekiel, a 6th century BC priest and prophet. Reviewers were not smitten by this new way to play, despite it being slightly more reminiscent of classic Tomb Raider. Citing the top-down approach led to stretches of unsatisfying repetition. Prophecy to this day is Lara's last adventure that remains exclusive to a handheld platform. Exciting and fresh as these portable experiences were, they were not the biggest headlines to hit the franchise in the new millennium. Since 1998, Eidos and Paramount Pictures had been knocking around the idea of a Tomb Raider feature film. Brent Friedman, who co-wrote Mortal Kombat: Annihilation, and Steven D'Souza, who wrote and directed Street Fighter, both threw their screenplays into the ring, but the final draft was penned by the movie's director, Simon West, and 4 other writers. In the title role, Paramount considered Demi Moore, Pamela Anderson, Jerry Ryan, Carla Pavonsky, and porn star Lindsay Dawn McKenzie, but the part eventually went to 26-year-old Angelina Jolie. Lara Croft: Tomb Raider premiered on June 11, 2001. It co-starred Daniel Craig, who would later become James Bond, Ian Glenn, who would later join the Resident Evil film franchise, and Jon Voight, Angelina's real-life father, as Lara's father, Richard, who before then was only mentioned in the first game's instruction manual. The film received horrible reviews and incredible ticket sales. It has an aggregate score of 33 out of 100 and is the most profitable video game movie of all time, with $274 million made worldwide. Fans most appreciated Jolie's physicality in the role, and not just her cup size. Certain moments were clearly inspired by the way Lara moves and shoots in each game. With Tomb Raider at local theaters, the franchise was at its peak in popularity. A sequel, subtitled The Cradle of Life, was planned and released in July of 2003, but after it earned less than half of the first film's take, and Jolie expressed zero interest in returning, a third was never developed. During the production of the first movie, a new Lara model was hired by Eidos, Jill de Jong. Several theme park attractions were built to promote the film series, including a flying roller coaster in Ontario and 3 giant top spins in Ohio, Virginia, and Lazise, Italy. They were revamped when Paramount Parks sold several of their properties to Cedar Fair in 2007. Lara's 6th console Tomb Raider was released in the summer of 2003 as well. It had been in development since the turn of the century and was originally supposed to come out in its usual November time slot the previous year. It launched on the PC and PlayStation 2. Lead programmer Richard Morton cited several problems with anticipating the PS2's performance, and these issues, along with sharing in the notoriety of the second movie, pushed the launch back a few months. It was clearly the most ambitious entry thus far. Tomb Raider: The Angel of Darkness also appeared in July of 2003. Early impressions suggested it was a much more grown-up game than any of the first 5. Lara now had dialogue options in certain conversations that sometimes affected how her adventure would play out. Ever resourceful, she was on the run from the authorities after her mentor, Von Croy, was murdered by a serial killer known as the Monstrum. Lara was blamed for the crime and evaded the police, along with a mysterious stranger, as she dug for answers. Von Croy's work tied him to a collection of 5 Obscura paintings that could revive a cubiculum Nephili, also known as an Angel of Darkness.
Damn it! I'm sick of your Parisian low-life ways. I need results.
Careful, Vixen. You don't need things to get any worse.
Tomb Raider 6 had 6 areas to explore and 35 individual levels. Lara illuminated the back streets and ghettos of Paris, the basement of the Louvre, and several locations in the city of Prague. For the first time, Lara was forced aside, and players took control of a different character, Curtis Trent. Peter Van Eckhart, the game's central villain, killed Curtis's father, and he joined Miss Croft in stopping Eckhart's plan. The arsenal had a bounty of new weapons, Lara could perform stealth takedowns and hand-to-hand combat moves, and her polygon count jumped from 500 to 5,000. Angel of Darkness told a thrilling story, but the game's real drama came from its flawed controls, bugs, and unnecessary additions. Lara now had an experience system that forced her to level up before she could perform actions she had been doing uninterrupted for 5 years. Eidos rushed the game to meet quarterly financial targets, so important sections got axed, and the controls were not rigorously tested. It sold a decent amount, eventually letting go of 2.5 million copies, but is critically considered the worst game in the series. Some attributed Cradle of Life's poor turnout to the animosity surrounding Lara's latest game. It would be the last Tomb Raider game created by Core Design. The company was sold off in 2006. In the third and final part of our Tomb Raider retrospective, another developer steps in to carry the torch. Lara loses her home, searches the world for the Sword of Swords, and celebrates her 10th anniversary in style. Looking for a fresh development team with new ideas, Lara and Eidos joined forces with the 11-year-old Crystal Dynamics in 2003. The San Francisco-based studio was responsible for, among other things, their own epic PS1 action saga, The Legacy of Kain. After finally releasing his long-awaited action-adventure Galleon and receiving a timid response, Lara's creator Toby Gard expressed an interest in joining Lara on her next quest. He eventually contributed to her cosmetic redesign, directed the cinematics, and co-wrote the story.
Hey! It's her!
Tomb Raider Legend was released in April of 2006 for the PC, PS2, Xbox, and the 5-month-old Xbox 360. Later that year, it would be joined by ports for the PlayStation Portable and the Nintendo DS, Game Boy Advance, and GameCube. The game's revamped leading lady got a new voice from film and television actress Keely Hawes.
I'm a terribly lucky girl. And here come the bloody tourists to spoil you.
And a new score from composer Troels Folman. Finally, model Karima Edby was officially revealed to be Legend's promotional pinup on February 14th, her birthday, as well as the birthday of Lara Croft herself. Despite a few nods to the prior games and feature films, Legend took the story of Lara back to Chapter 1. The game's opening revealed Lara's mother, Amelia, had vanished in a temple the two discovered after their plane crashed in the Himalayas. As an adult, Lara discovered the temple housed a fragment of the legendary Excalibur, King Arthur's blade. Retrieving the other pieces put her up against the wealthy adventurer James Rutland and Lara's old friend Amanda Everett, who was presumed dead after being lost in a tomb in Peru. Lara's crusade took her to a record 7 locations: Bolivia, Peru, Tokyo, Ghana, Kazakhstan, England, and Nepal. the first time in 7 years, Croft Manor once again served as an explorable training ground with its own secrets and hidden items. The grappling hook, briefly featured in Tomb Raider Chronicles, was now utilized in traversal, combat, and puzzle solving. Grenades could now be tossed by hand, targets could be jumped off of or kicked under, and certain spots in the environment could be shot to take out a group of enemies. Lara got back on her bike, gunning a Ducati through 2 different stages, and Crystal Dynamics snuck in some QuickTime events to boost the game's cinematic quality. Everything about Legend was quicker than any other Tomb Raider, including the 4 to 7 hour playtime. Turning, jumping, hanging, and swinging with Lara was much more comfortable and intuitive. She could shimmy at double speed and rotate blocks easily instead of having to switch sides. She also blew up her wardrobe budget with a ton of outfits to unlock. Fans and critics were both excited about Tomb Raider 7. Collectively, it sold around 4.5 million copies. For the first time, it seemed the story of one game was going to carry directly into another, as Lara concluded Legend by discovering her mother might still be alive and running off to find her. The story was expected to continue in the next game, but after the reboot came the remake. That year, 2006, was the 10th anniversary of the original Tomb Raider, and drawing up this new, third-generation Lara Croft, part of the team at Crystal Dynamics expressed the desire to do an update on the original PS1 classic, and Eidos approved. It would use the Legend engine and keep the same composer and the same Lara, albeit one a few years younger. Tomb Raider Anniversary shipped in June of 2007. The Xbox 360 version came out 4 months later and was the first full retail game available for download on the Xbox Live Marketplace. It told the same story as before, with Natla and her stooges Larson and Pierre fighting Lara for possession of all 3 pieces of the Atlantean Scion. Familiar areas were retouched or completely remastered, and QuickTime events stood in for certain moments players remembered actually playing before. The grappling hook made the packing list with new puzzles to accommodate its use. Since her controls were almost identical to Legend, except for a couple of new abilities, Lara was infinitely more agile than she had been 10 years prior. Anniversary reviewed as well as Legend had. Some reviews stated it was one of the rare remakes that surpassed the original. It only sold 1.5 million copies, making it the least successful game in the series, but fans gleefully accepted the homage and the return to seeing a new title from the franchise on a yearly basis. When it came time to continue the new story from Legend, Crystal Dynamics created a brand new game engine. Colin O'Malley signed on to compose the new score, taking themes from the work of the 2 previous games. They also hired the 8th and final Lara double, bringing in gymnast Alison Carroll. She was the last woman Eidos would seek out to portray Lara Croft in the real world. Tomb Raider Underworld surfaced in November of 2008. It documented the search for Mjolnir, the hammer belonging to Thor, the Norse god of thunder. In the race to find it, Lara was reunited with old rivals Amanda Everett and Jacqueline Natla, and came face to face with her very own doppelganger who destroyed Croft Manor. While Legend was designed for the PS2 but brought up to the standards of the next generation, Underworld was designed from the get-go to take advantage of all Crystal Dynamics had learned about the Xbox 360. Each area reacted more naturally when destroyed or exposed to weather. Lara, along with a cosmetic upgrade, was given new ways to subtly interact with her surroundings. She also stripped away her blue and khaki uniform for a brown top with black shorts. Tomb Raider Underworld has sold more than 2.5 million copies. It arrived on the PlayStation 3 in 2009 and was included in a package that brought Legend and Anniversary to the PS3 in 2011 called the Tomb Raider Trilogy. Underworld also received a port on the N-Gage and Nintendo DS, and the Nintendo Wii version included features specific to the console's Wii Remote tech. For the first time since 1999, a Tomb Raider game had extra downloadable levels, 2 short episodes called Beneath the Ashes and Lara's Shadow. Underworld was the end of a trilogy. It launched with Tomb Raider Legend and began chronologically with Anniversary. At this turning point, Crystal Dynamics decided to create not only a new story, but a new series. Just like the film series about a certain doctor of archaeology that served as her earliest inspiration, Lara's next project was self-titled. Similar to Curse of the Sword, it was entirely isometric, but unlike any Tomb Raider game ever made, it could be played cooperatively. Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light launched exclusively on Xbox Live Arcade in August of 2010. It reached the PC and PlayStation Network 4 weeks later and iOS devices in December. The adventure began after Lara discovered the Mirror of Smoke, which contained the imprisoned spirit of Zolot, the Keeper of Darkness. Lara was ambushed by mercenaries who released the trapped god, and Lara was warned by the immortal Guardian of Light, Totek, that the two had until dawn to stop him. Players could attempt this solo, or team up with Totek and a friend. Crystal Dynamics included several elements that fans would find familiar, including Lara's voice by Keeley Hawes, previously composed music from Troels Folman and Colin O'Malley, and environmental elements recycled from their recent games. Guardian was Keeley's last performance as Lara Croft, making her contribution the longest of any one voice actress.
When I'm gone, this place will be lost again. But for how long?
Totek was voiced by Jim Cummings, an industry legend who most know as Dr. Robotnik, Winnie the Pooh, and Darkwing Duck.
Zolot must be imprisoned within the mirror and return to this place before the light of dawn.
Working in tandem between Lara's grappling hook and Totek's spears, the pair watched each other's backs through 14 levels. Almost everyone agreed Guardian of Light was a genre gamble that paid off. The twitch combat, open platforming, and co-op puzzle solving was all a perfect fit for Tomb Raider. The game received 5 downloadable content packs and sold over 100,000 copies in the first few months. Underworld was 9th in the line of main console-released Tomb Raider games. Guardian of Light was considered in its own series, but the smaller, experimental team at Crystal Dynamics soon switched to the main series after its release. What exactly the studio had in store for Tomb Raider 10 was something of a mystery. At E3 in 2012, Square Enix, which purchased Eidos in 2009, presented an even more daring retelling of Lara's life. It was simply called Tomb Raider. In its harrowing tale of survival, Lara Croft was voiced by Camilla Luddington. The rest of the cast were new faces in a new story. Lara has been known to take a sabbatical or two from the land of console action-adventure, but she's never really left our hearts. In 1999, she joined with Top Cow for a comic book series that ran until 2005. She sauntered into the mobile phone market in 2003, starring in Osiris Codex, Quest for the Cinnabar, Elixir of Life, and Puzzle Paradox. GameTap helped animate Lara for their show Revisioned in 2007, and cast Minnie Driver to give her interpretation of what the dashing Miss Croft should sound like.
Thank you, gentlemen. I've long fancied the Scarlet Scarab. Cheers.
Well, you have my total attention now. I'm not quite sure if I've got yours, though.
5 women have now supplied the voice of gaming's most experienced archaeologist. Shelley Blonde introduced us to Lara's confidence and wit in the first game.
Back again.
And you? For a grand reopening, I assume.
And Judith Gibbons delivered a more mature, refined performance in Tomb Raider 2 and 3.
Don't you think you've seen enough?
Jonelle Elliott gave Lara a bit more attitude for her next 3 games.
What do you want? Advice? A decent coat? Deodorant?
And Keely Hawes had arguably the most seductive tone of them all.
Isn't that what it's all about? Why we dig up the past? To understand it?
Eidos casting worked twice as hard over the years, picking women to stand in front of a photo lens along with a microphone. Excluding Angelina Jolie's first 2 film portrayals, 8 women brought Toby Gard's originally outlandish concept to life, almost 1 per main game. The lovely ladies include, in chronological order, Natalie Cook, Rona Mitra, Nell McAndrew, Laura Weller, Lucy Clarkson, Jill DeJong, Karima Adbeeb, and Allison Carroll. So, who is Lara Croft? 16 different women have given us their answer to that question across 14 games, 2 motion pictures, and countless appearances in other media. Her impossible figure may have paid the bills, but the series has endured because Lara's indomitable will is intoxicating. Her beauty and bravado helped women get noticed when games needed something more adult than a bandicoot, plumber, or hedgehog. She paved the way for more women warriors like Joanna Dark, Rain, and Bayonetta, and she's still going strong. Before too long, Lara's franchise will be as old as Lara herself. When future generations look back at early primitive video game technology, Tomb Raider will stand out as a pioneer in bridging the gap between the action-adventure film and the action-adventure game. It's been slow to adapt, but each of Lara's adventures was always full of surprises. As Lara writes her latest legend, she faces a new generation of thrill-seekers. Perhaps it'll be love at first sight all over again. See this and other GT shows and game reviews on the GT Originals iOS app, available now on the App Store.